Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is part 2 of animal biology. We're looking at the phylum Cnidaria. Ignore that little C there, it doesn't really make a sound. So this is where we're looking at jellyfish, sea anemones, and corals. So what are they? So we are soft-bodied, and they also have these things that are distinguishing called nematocyst. It's a stinging tentacle. So it works kind of like a harpoon, which we'll see a little video at in a second. So you can see there's hundreds of them on an arm. And what it does is it's all coiled up and they're pressure released. As soon as something comes into contact with it, it shoots it out, coils, inserts it into it, and releases a toxin. And then also they just have the one opening similar to the sponges. Okay, you can write that down. Uh, in order to differentiate from the sponges, which we're going to be doing a lot, is differentiating between different phyla, whereas the sponges had 2 layers, these ones have 3, and it is the epidermis, the mesoglea, and the gastroderm. Okay, as you can see, here are your 3 levels. Here, epidermis outside, mesoglea in the middle, and gastrodermis on the inside. Oops, sorry, okay, so I went too fast. Okay, so the other thing that is a little bit different here is that there's 2 main life cycles here. We have the polyp, which is sessile, which means it cannot move. And then we have the medusa, which is the motile, or it can move. And it's got that bell shape, and it uses jet propulsion in order to go. The thing about this one is that this is moving, and then this is stationary. This is the more mature, and this is the juvenile. I'm not sure if I spelled that right. Juvenile, whereas in the sponges it was completely the opposite. The more mature sponges were stationary, and the juvenile ones were able to move around in order to find a new place to live. Okay, so you can pause that and write it down. Feeding and digestion. For feeding, it's going to be using those nematocysts in order to sting its prey with its poison-filled sac. The dart buries itself into the prey, and what it does is it kills and paralyzes it.
Inside the capsules lie thread-like projectiles loaded with deadly poisons. When unleashed, these weapons fire with the acceleration of a rifle bullet. They pierce their target and pump it full of paralyzing toxins. The tentacles must be touched before the weapons can discharge. And for that, the prey must come to the anemone. Its plant-like appearance perfectly conceals its very deadly intent. In silent ambush, the anemone awaits its prey. For the goby, one unguarded moment could be fatal. Dragging the fish into its mouth, the anemone devours it with tools invented by its ancient ancestors. The goby will be slowly digested alive.
Then it uses the tentacles to put its food into its mouth, and then it enters its gastrovascular cavity, which is similar to what our stomach would be. It's a holding cell or holding area for food. Food is broken up, and then the small pieces are taken up by cells. Keeping on moving on, there's a symbiotic relationship with some photosynthetic organisms, and the protist gets CO2 and other waste from the cnidarian. Waste from the cnidarian is actually useful for those protists. And the cnidarian gets O2 and carbohydrates from those protists. So as you can see, these green cells in here will be photosynthetic protists. Reproduction, we already mentioned it a little bit about the 2 different types of life cycles. There's asexual budding, just like there was in the sponges, but there's also sexual reproduction, where the medusa, these mature jellyfish or cnidarians, produce sperm and egg. They come together and they're fertilized. Just like the just sponges, they can either incur outside. The egg can come outside of the female, or it can be fertilized inside, depending on what the species is. And then once they come together, it forms what we call a zygote, and then it goes into these swimming larvae, which attach to the substrate, begin to grow, mature, they bud off, and form these medusa. Okay, you can pause that. Here's something new. This Cnidarian phyla has a very, very simplistic nervous system. So we call it a nerve net. So it's not localized, which means it's not a organized area like a brain. That's called cephalization. And it's centered around the mouth. So if you look at here, right, so you have these nerve nets which extend down and nervous system. So why would you think it would centralize around the mouth? Well, it's just because that's where the food's going to be going. Sensory cells in the epidermis. So epithelial or epidermis is where we have those skin-like cells, but there's specific ones that can sense. And then the last few things here is just some of the different types. You don't have to write these down, of cnidarians. So there's corals, anemones, hydroids, jellyfish. So really, as long as you know that there's more than one type, it's not just jellyfish, there's anemones and corals, you're in good shape. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them down. Otherwise, we'll see you next day.